The concourse at Grand Central Station pulsed like a living organism, shoes clicking against marble floors, bodies weaving through each other with silent urgency, voices echoing beneath the gilded ceiling like a symphony without a conductor. It was the kind of chaos that most people avoided, but Nathaniel Carter for once was in the middle of it. He hated disorder. He built his life and his billion-dollar hotel empire around precision. Timetables, contracts perfectly aligned, napkin folds. He found peace in symmetry. But today, none of that mattered. He was already 20 minutes late. His niece Emily had just arrived from a school trip in Boston and had promised, rather dramatically, to stand near the main clock, wearing a yellow hoodie and no glasses. That was all the detail she'd given him. In his world of schedules and spreadsheets, this level of ambiguity was intolerable. He scanned the crowd, his eyes darting between teenagers with backpacks and tourists with cameras. There were too many yellow jackets to count. He stepped around. A group of musicians tuning their instruments, and adjusted his dark wool coat as a text lit up his phone. "I'm near the coffee kiosk, no glasses, still yellow hoodie. Hurry." Nathaniel looked up. Just ahead, beside a kiosk with a chipped espresso machine, stood a woman in a bright yellow hoodie, her hair tied in a lazy bun, a worn canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. She was looking away, holding a paper cup with both hands, swaying slightly as if to a tune only she could hear. Without thinking, without even confirming, Nathaniel strode forward and swept his arms around her. "There you are," he exclaimed, laughing as he lifted her gently off the ground. "Let me guess. You got roped into helping a group of grandmas play mahjong on the train again." The woman went rigid in his arms. For a beat, the world paused. Then she spun, elbowing him hard in the ribs and stepping back like a startled deer. "What in the hell are you doing?" Nathaniel stumbled slightly, catching himself against a support pillar. The woman now stood before him, eyes blazing with fury, coffee sloshed down one sleeve. She was most certainly not his niece. "You can't just grab people like that," she snapped. "Do I look like I want to be hugged by some Armani suit wearing lunatic?" I'm sorry, he gasped, hand pressed to his side. "I thought you were someone else." "Oh, really? You go around embracing strangers like it's a networking tactic." The nearby crowd had slowed. Someone muttered, "Is that the guy from Forbes?" Another pulled out their phone. Nathaniel raised his hands, voice lowering into something more apologetic. "My niece. She said she'd be wearing that exact hoodie. I didn't mean to. Look, it was an honest mistake." The woman didn't move. Her dark eyes studied him, skeptical but slightly amused now that the shock was fading. "You thought I was your niece and decided to tackle me like a linebacker?" "Well, I didn't tackle. More like warmly surprise." That was not warm. That was kidnapping adjacent. Despite himself, Nathaniel let out a chuckle. She didn't smile. Not exactly, but the edge of her lips betrayed the faintest twitch. He straightened his coat. "You have a strong elbow. You train professionally?" "I street perform on weekends. Builds upper body strength." She sipped what remained of her coffee. "Also, you smell like cologne and capitalism." "Is that a bad thing?" She tilted her head. "Depends. Are you always this forward? Only on days I mistake people for family." A voice broke through the crowd. "Uncle Nate?" Emily emerged, weaving through commuters with her arms raised. She wasn't wearing a yellow hoodie, more mustard than lemon, and her hair wasn't in a bun. No backpack in sight. Nathaniel winced. The woman in front of him turned to look. "Well, would you look at that? Two completely different people. Who'd have guessed?" "I'm really truly sorry," he said again. "You have every right to be mad." "I'm not mad," she said. "I'm mildly entertained." Emily finally reached them, eyeing the scene with curious delight. "Did you just hug a stranger again? This is becoming a habit." Nathaniel ignored her and turned to the woman. "Let me make it up to you. Coffee, lunch, anything." "Let's not get carried away," she replied, adjusting her backpack. "You can start by not hugging strangers." With that, she turned and walked off, her steps light, head held high. Nathaniel stood frozen, watching the yellow hoodie disappear into the crowd. "Who was that?" Emily asked, nudging him. "No idea. She seemed cool. You should totally find her again." He shook his head. "Pretty sure I already used up all my charm points with that one." Emily smirked. "You're going to think about her tonight." He didn't respond. But as they exited the station and hailed a cab, Nathaniel couldn't stop replaying the moment. The smell of her cinnamon coffee, the sharp pain in his ribs, the fire in her eyes. He'd met thousands of people in his life. negotiated with dignitaries, dined with royalty. But no one had ever made him feel quite like that. Not from a hug, not from a slap, not from anything. By the time the cab pulled away, he realized something startling. He hadn't even gotten her name, and for the first time in a long time, Nathaniel Carter regretted a missed detail. Later that night, in the sterile glow of his penthouse suite, he stood by the window overlooking the city, untouched glass of wine in hand, wondering how often life offered you someone unforgettable disguised as an accident. Somewhere out there, a girl in a yellow hoodie had a story about the crazy stranger who hugged her in a train station. If he had anything to say about it, that wouldn't be the end of it. It would only be the beginning. The following Saturday, Central Park had transformed into a vibrant celebration of cultures, creativity, and community. It was the annual Manhattan Cultural Fair, an event that sprawled across the green heart of the city like a tapestry of food stalls, artisan tents, and live music. The scent of roasted almonds and garlic naan floated through the crisp spring air, mingling with the excited chatter of visitors and the hum of distant saxophones. Nathaniel Carter was there out of obligation more than desire. His company, Carter Lux Hotels, had recently become a headline sponsor of the fair's artistic stage, which meant he was expected to show up, smile for the press, and give a speech about community development through cultural investment. He hated speeches. He especially hated crowds. But what he hated more was doing nothing when people needed opportunity. And the fair was exactly that for artists, small businesses, and young talents trying to make their mark in a city that often ignored them. He moved through the booths with the detached grace of a man who spent more time in boardrooms than public parks. His niece Emily walked beside him, completely at ease, holding a skewer of grilled pineapple and waving at everyone as if she were running for office. "This is your vibe, right?" she asked, licking a drip of juice from her hand. "Colorful. Chaos, music in every corner, nothing pre-scheduled?" He smirked. "My vibe is silence, order, and knowing where the exits are." "You're impossible," she said, nudging him. "You should try being unpredictable once in a while." They paused near the east side of the great lawn, where a modest wooden stage had been set up under strings of paper lanterns. A crowd had started to gather, forming a quiet semicircle in front of a lone figure tuning a guitar. Nathaniel didn't see her face at first. Just a yellow hoodie, slightly faded, pulled over hair tied in a loose bun. He felt his stomach turn, with something oddly familiar. Then she stepped up to the microphone. He froze. Ruby Moreno. She was humming softly, adjusting her stance, letting the guitar chords resonate through the speaker. No fanfare, no introduction. And then, with a calm, grounded breath, she began to sing. It wasn't a pop song or a flashy anthem. It was a stripped-down version of Simon and Garfunkel's The Boxer. Her voice was raw and unpolished in the best possible way, textured, with emotion and control. It cut through the background noise like glass through water, pulling everyone into her orbit. Nathaniel stood still, heart climbing its own rhythm. Emily whispered, "Isn't that the girl from—" "Yeah," he murmured. "That's her." When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause, some people even standing. Ruby looked surprised by the reaction, bowing slightly before stepping off the stage. She moved quickly, not basking in the limelight, but clearly grateful. Nathaniel hesitated, then followed. He found her behind the stage, winding her guitar strap with practiced fingers, her hoodie now tied around her waist. She was laughing quietly with one of the event coordinators, relaxed in a way she hadn't been the last time they met. He stepped forward, clearing his throat softly. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. She turned, caught off guard, for only a second before recognition lit her eyes. "Well, if it isn't Manhattan's most misunderstood hugger," she said, folding her arms. He smiled, tentative. "I came to see the cultural impact of my hotel funding. Looks like I got more than I bargained for." "You fund this fair?" "One of the sponsors," he replied. "You're the best investment I didn't plan on." She blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "I just got lucky with a slot." One of the singers dropped. "Out last minute," she said, recovering. "And here I thought my career would start with a viral coffee shop video." He glanced around. "You always sing like that? With that much honesty?" "I don't know how else to do it," she said. "I sing because there's no better way to tell the truth." Nathaniel watched her. There was no posturing in her, no agenda, just this steady current of authenticity that both unsettled and intrigued him. "I meant what I said at the station," he added. "Let me make it up to you." "You already kind of did," she said. "That performance got picked. Up by a local paper yesterday. Small feature, but it's something. He nodded, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. It gleamed in the light. Carter Lux embossed in gold. If you're ever interested, our hotel has a residency program. We host weekly sets at the rooftop lounge. Private, small audiences. You'd be perfect for it. Ruby eyed the card, but didn't take it. You want to give me a job now? I want to give you a platform, he corrected. And yes, we pay well. She considered this, and why me? Because you don't try to be anyone else. That's rare. And because you make people stop what they're doing and listen. For a moment. She didn't respond. She just stared at him like she was trying to read more than the words he'd spoken. I'll think about it, she said finally. He smiled. That's all I ask. Later that day, as the sun dipped lower and music from other stages filled the air, Nathaniel watched from a distance as Ruby packed her guitar and spoke with fans. She moved like she didn't need anyone's approval, but he knew that wasn't entirely true. Everyone needed someone to believe in them. And for reasons he didn't fully understand yet, he wanted to be that person for her. When he returned home that night, Emily was waiting in his living room with 2 mugs of tea and a grin that stretched too wide. So, she said, you're in trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind that makes you look like someone just played piano on your heartstrings. Nathaniel didn't answer. He simply stared out the window, watching the city shimmer, and thought about a girl with a voice like truth and a hoodie like sunshine. He hadn't meant to find her again. But now that he had, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was already beginning. And this time, it wasn't a mistake. A week had passed since the cultural fair, but Ruby couldn't stop thinking about the man with the business card and the gentle voice who looked at her as if he wasn't trying to solve her, only to understand her. She'd tucked Nathaniel Carter's card into the back pocket of her journal where she normally kept things she didn't yet know what to do with. Her grandfather, Papa Luis, had found it while helping her clean. This looks expensive, he said, squinting at the embossed letters. You know this man? I sang at the fair, she said with a shrug. And he showed up. Twice now, it's weird. Papa Luis sat at the cramped kitchen table, his hands trembling slightly as he poured 2 cups of black coffee. You don't get many chances in this life, mija. If someone opens a door even a little, at least peek inside. Ruby bit her lip. It just feels too good, too fast. Not every opportunity is a trap, he said softly. Some are simply overdue blessings. The next day, Ruby stood in the gleaming lobby of the Aurelia Hotel, Carter Lux's midtown jewel. Marble floors stretched beneath her boots, chandeliers spilled light like waterfalls, and polished staff moved like dancers in a silent performance. She felt like a tourist in her own city. At the reception desk, a young woman greeted her with a practiced smile. Ms. Moreno, welcome. Mr. Carter said you'd be arriving. You'll be performing for a private committee tonight. Just a brief set. We're considering candidates for our spring residency series. The elevator ride to the rooftop lounge made Ruby feel like her organs had rearranged. When the doors opened, she stepped into a room so beautiful it stunned her. Floor to ceiling. Glass overlooked the city skyline. A sleek baby grand piano waited in the corner. Scattered cocktail tables, flickering candles, low jazz humming through invisible speakers. It all felt like walking into someone else's life. She was escorted to a small green room where she could prepare, but she didn't need makeup or glamour. She needed stillness. Alone with her guitar, she sat for 5 minutes, breathing, remembering who she was. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage and took her place on the stool, heart pounding louder than any amplifier. She sang something simple, something her mother had once hummed while washing dishes. She didn't try to impress, she didn't perform. She just told the truth the only way she knew how. When she finished, the applause was polite, professional, except from the back corner of the room where one man clapped just a little longer, just a little louder. Nathaniel. She met his gaze. He didn't smile, not right away. He just nodded once, like he was saying, "That's who I thought you were." After the set, the committee retreated for deliberation. Ruby waited by the balcony, her hands cold despite the spring air. She didn't expect Nathaniel to come over, but he did. "I told you," he said quietly. "You have the room." "Do I also have the job?" "That depends. Are you ready to be seen?" Ruby exhaled. "Why me?" "Really?" He leaned on the balcony rail. "Most people walk into a room and perform. You walk in and reveal. It's rare. And that honesty? It's something this place desperately needs. She hesitated, the city glittering beneath them. You don't know me. I know enough, he said. I know you're not afraid to speak through silence. And I know you didn't ask for this. That makes you dangerous in the best way. She looked at him then, not with suspicion but curiosity. You always talk like that? Like you're pitching the climax of a novel? He laughed, easing back. Only when I mean it. Later that week, Ruby received a contract. 3 nights a week. Dinner performances. Full creative control. She accepted on one condition. Her first performance would be open to the public, free. Nathaniel agreed without hesitation. On the night of her debut, the lounge was packed. She wore a simple black dress with her mother's silver earrings and played with her eyes closed. Not to block out the crowd, but to stay close to the story. She sang about loneliness and about the way a city can feel colder than a blizzard when no one knows your name. She didn't know Nathaniel had reserved the entire front row. He didn't interrupt, didn't approach. He listened. Afterwards, he waited until the guests had left and offered to walk her down to the lobby. Instead, she found herself saying yes when he invited her to a quiet bistro a few blocks away. They sat at a window table, a bottle of wine between them. The place was dim, cozy, humming with laughter and the occasional clatter of dishes. Ruby kicked off her shoes under the table and curled her feet up in the booth, and Nathaniel loosened his tie and shrugged out of his blazer like he was shedding a skin. He told her about growing up with a father who measured success by net worth, and a mother who measured it by how often he came home for dinner. About the first hotel he bought at 26, and how he spent 3 years living in one of its suites, pretending it was the life he wanted. She told him about Papa Luis, about losing her parents in a car accident when she was 17, about the way grief builds walls you don't even know you're hiding behind. They didn't flirt. They didn't laugh too much. They just unfolded. At some point, a piano in the corner of the restaurant caught her eye. You play? She asked. Not anymore. Why not? He hesitated. Stopped feeling like music belonged to me. Well, she said, standing. Let's borrow it then. She coaxed him to the bench. He played a hesitant scale, then another. She joined in, her voice floating above the notes, creating something delicate and fleeting. A few patrons applauded when they finished, but Ruby didn't hear them. She was watching him. You're not as polished as you pretend, she said. And you're not as guarded as you think. They left the restaurant in silence, walking side by side down Fifth Avenue, passing strangers who had no idea that something important had shifted in the air between them. At the corner, Ruby paused. This was not a date. No, Nathaniel agreed. But it could be the beginning of one. She didn't kiss him. He didn't ask. But when she walked away, her steps were slower, as if she was already halfway thinking of turning back. And when he stood there watching her fade into the glow of the city, Nathaniel realized something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Hope, and this time it wasn't accidental. It was earned. By the end of her 3rd week at the Aurelia, Ruby had become more than a resident performer. She was the heartbeat of the lounge. Guests returned, not just for the 5-star cuisine or the glittering view of Manhattan's skyline, but for the girl who sang like every lyric was lived, every note carried from the marrow of her soul. It should have been a dream. For a while it was. But the city doesn't let you live a fairy tale without consequence. One Thursday morning, Ruby walked into the lounge and found a tabloid splayed across the bar. Her picture took up half the front page. She was mid-performance, caught in the golden stage light with her eyes closed and hand over her heart. The headline read, Mystery Girl Melts Hotel Tycoon's Heart, Music, Money and More. Below, the subtext twisted what had been beautiful into scandal. Sources confirm Nathaniel Carter's newest lounge act may be more than just talent. Is love in the air? Or is this another Cinderella story rewritten with corporate ink? Ruby stood frozen, the tabloid fluttering slightly in the AC's breeze. That evening she performed with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and when Nathaniel offered to walk her out, she declined. She took the subway back to Queens, choosing the long ride over a car service, needing time to think. When she arrived home, Papa Luis was waiting at the table, sipping tea with the television muted. You saw it? She asked. He nodded. People will always talk, Mija. Let them. What matters is what you know to be true. She wanted to believe that. But it didn't silence the storm that had started inside her. The next morning brought more coverage. Gossip blogs ran side-by-side images of Nathaniel attending her performances and smiling like a man smitten. Rumors snowballed. Comment sections debated whether she was a genuine talent or a clever opportunist. The pressure escalated when Vanessa Langford resurfaced. Tall, poised, and always wearing the kind of smile that implied she knew something you didn't, Vanessa had once been Nathaniel's fiancée. Now she was his company's lead PR strategist, a fact Ruby hadn't been prepared for. At the Aurelia's Spring Charity Gala, Vanessa appeared at Ruby's side like a shadow. "Lovely dress," she said, with a glance. "Is it vintage or just secondhand?" Ruby turned, jaw set. "Either way, I didn't have to bribe a stylist for it." Vanessa smirked. "Touché. Listen, I just want to offer a bit of advice. This world, it chews up idealists. You either adapt or you get swallowed whole." "I didn't ask for advice," Ruby replied, steady. "No," Vanessa said, voice lowering. "But you will wish you had. Especially when they start questioning why Nathaniel put you on stage and not someone with a pedigree." Ruby felt the room closing in, the crystal chandeliers too bright, the silk of her dress suddenly suffocating. She didn't wait for the speeches to end. She slipped out through a side door and into the cold night air, walking fast, heels clutched in one hand, her phone buzzing in the other. Nathaniel's name blinked on the screen, but she ignored it. The next day, she didn't show up at the hotel. When she finally returned, Nathaniel was waiting in the lounge before her rehearsal. He stood when she walked in, but she didn't stop. "Ruby," he said, stepping into her path. She paused. "Do you believe I used you?" His face flinched like she'd slapped him. "No, of course not. Because that's what people are saying. That I'm a gold digger. That I'm playing you. That my voice is just a hook. They don't know you. But they're judging me because of you," she said quietly. "Because you're Nathaniel Carter, and I'm just the girl who sings on a borrowed stage." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "You should have warned me about Vanessa," she added. "I didn't think she'd come after you," he said. "She plays games, but I never thought She doesn't scare me," Ruby interrupted. "But this world, it's not mine. I'm not built for boardrooms and backhanded smiles." He looked pained, like he'd been caught in the middle of a storm with no shelter. "I don't want you to leave," he said, "and I don't want to lose myself trying to stay." That night, Ruby sang one last set. She wore red. She didn't tell anyone it would be her final performance, but the moment felt like a goodbye. Her voice cracked on the bridge of the last song, and no one noticed except Nathaniel. He didn't approach her afterward. He let her go. When he returned to his office the next morning, a small manila envelope waited on his desk. Inside was her badge, a short note written in blue ink, and her guitar pick. She'd left him her voice, and taken with her the silence that only love leaves behind. At a board meeting later that week, Nathaniel faced questions about the media storm, about why she'd been hired, about whether he was emotionally compromised. He shut them down with a sentence. "She was the most talented artist we've ever had, and I won't apologize for recognizing that." But the rumors didn't die. Neither did the ache. In his penthouse apartment, Nathaniel played the piano again. Just once. Just enough to remember the feeling of her beside him, singing softly, rewriting the air between them. And when he stopped, the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like absence. Ruby, meanwhile, left New York without fanfare. She took a bus to Chicago and moved into her cousin's spare bedroom. By day, she volunteered at a community center, teaching music to kids who reminded her of herself. Brilliant, overlooked, and full of fight. By night, she played old songs to herself, refusing to write anything new. One afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up outside the center. A beautiful upright piano was wheeled in. No return address, no sender name, only a single typed note taped to the lid, for the ones who still believe in magic. Anne Ruby didn't cry, but she played. For the first time in weeks she played, and the children clapped and her cousin smiled. And outside, under the falling Chicago sun, she sat on the steps and let herself believe, just a little, that maybe not all broken things had to stay broken. Back in New York, Nathaniel sat in his office looking at a photo from the gala. Not of the event itself, but of Ruby. Taken candidly, she was laughing at something someone had said, her head tilted back, unguarded. He realized he wasn't mourning a relationship. He was mourning a chance. And somehow that was worse. Chuang Ti Ding Duan Inn. Chicago, the air felt different. The noise was softer, the buildings less urgent. The community center where Ruby had started teaching music sat between a laundromat and a corner store with fading neon. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't echo with the hush of wealth, but it was real. It smelled like pencil shavings, worn out, sneakers, and the sweat of kids trying to learn how to be something more than the world had told them they were. Ruby had found work fast. Her cousin Elena ran the neighborhood art program and needed someone who could coax rhythm out of broken recorders and kids with short attention spans. Ruby didn't hesitate. She needed the work. But more than that, she needed a place to hide. Somewhere her name didn't get whispered, where no one mistook her voice for an angle or her smile for strategy. It was there, in a cramped classroom, with peeling walls and a stubborn radiator, that she began to feel something close to steady again. Every day she showed up. She taught scales to boys who didn't know their fathers and harmonies to girls who barely trusted their own voices. She taught discipline, tempo, resilience. And she played only when the room was empty. At dusk, when the last of the students had gone and the silence settled in like a familiar coat. Her hands moved over the keys with caution at first. But music, like love, returns when you stop forcing it to. Still, Nathaniel haunted her. Not like a ghost, but like a possibility left, unfinished. She hadn't blocked his number. She hadn't deleted his messages. She just couldn't answer them. Every time she tried, words failed. What could she say? That she missed him? That his world had burned hers, even as it made her shine? Sometimes she'd find herself staring out the window during class, the piano's worn cover closed, and wonder if he was still in New York thinking about her too. Or if he had moved on, tucked her away in a chapter labeled Almost. Nathaniel hadn't moved on. Back in Manhattan, he was unraveling slowly. His routines remained. Meetings were attended. Deals were closed, but everything felt hollow. Food tasted muted. Rooms he once loved now echoed. The rooftop lounge where Ruby used to perform had never been so quiet. He tried to distract himself with work, with travel, with Emily's insistence that he start dating again. But nothing fit. Every woman he met seemed to say the wrong thing, or smile with teeth too sharp. Every conversation made him feel like he was pretending to be someone else again. Someone who hadn't once watched a woman sing under fairy lights and known in his bones that he was in the presence of something sacred. He still checked her social media, even though she hadn't posted in weeks. He still drove by the park where they first reconnected. And he still played the piano, alone in the dark, fumbling through pieces they once shared. It was Emily who finally found her. Or rather, found a breadcrumb. She was scrolling late one night and stumbled on a video posted by a local Chicago nonprofit. It was grainy footage, a girl leading a group of kids through a clapping rhythm game. But Emily knew that bun, that voice, that laugh. She burst into Nathaniel's office the next morning, phone in hand. I found her. He watched the video in silence. Ruby was crouched beside a boy with two big headphones, gently guiding his hands as he played the drum pads. Her smile was unguarded. She looked exhausted and radiant and alive. Nathaniel left for Chicago the next day. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't even alert Elena or the center's staff. He just sat in a rented car across the street and waited. Watched. He saw Ruby leave the building just before sunset, a tote bag over her shoulder, her guitar strapped to her back like a soldier's weapon. She looked thinner, but her steps still had that rhythm, half dancer, half survivor. He didn't approach. He returned the next day and the one after that. Always parked in the same spot, always leaving before she noticed. Once, she passed right, in front of his car, head down, humming to herself. He didn't breathe until she was gone. And then one Friday afternoon, he did something he hadn't planned. He sent her a gift. It wasn't flowers or jewelry or anything predictable. It was a piano, a beautiful upright kawaii, the kind that belonged in a small concert hall. It was delivered to the community center with no sender name. Just a simple note, typed and taped to the lid, for the ones who still believe in magic. When Ruby saw it, her breath caught. She knew immediately. She placed her palm gently on the keys, not pressing down, just feeling the cool weight of the ivory. Then she sat, played one soft chord, and for the first time in weeks the music didn't hurt. It healed. That evening she stayed late, played for no one and everyone. Her fingers moved not with performance but with prayer. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But when she finally stood, something had shifted. She walked home, her heart restless. In her apartment, she stared at her phone, Nathaniel's name glowing in her recent calls. She wanted to call him. But what would she say? That she missed him? That she was angry? That he'd been right about everything and still made every part of her uncertain? Instead, she typed a message. I'm okay. She didn't send it right away. She read it 10 times. Then she hit send. Nathaniel received it at 2:14 a.m. He read it in bed, lit only by the blue light of his screen. He smiled, a small broken thing, and placed the phone on his chest like it was a lifeline. Then he slept for the first time in 3 nights. In the days that followed, Ruby kept teaching. Nathaniel kept waiting. But something in the current had changed. They were no longer two people torn apart. They were two people finding their way back, inch by cautious inch. In Chicago, the kids started calling the piano Miss Ruby's magic box. They said it made the room feel warmer. Some even claimed it helped them sleep better after lessons. Ruby didn't correct them. Magic was as good an explanation as any, but the truth she knew was simpler. It wasn't magic. It was love. Quiet, stubborn, unfinished love. And somewhere across the country, in a glass tower overlooking the city where they'd met, that same love sat at a piano bench, still waiting for its next note. In Chicago, the air felt different. The noise was softer, the buildings less urgent. The community center where Ruby had started teaching music sat between a laundromat and a corner store with fading neon. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't echo with the hush of wealth. But it was real. It smelled like pencil shavings, worn-out sneakers, and the sweat of kids trying to learn how to be something more than the world had told them they were. Ruby had found work fast. Her cousin Elena ran the neighborhood art program and needed someone who could coax rhythm out of broken recorders and kids with short attention spans. Ruby didn't hesitate. She needed the work. But more than that, she needed a place to hide. Somewhere her name didn't get whispered, where no one mistook her voice for an angle or her smile for strategy. It was there in a cramped classroom, with peeling walls and a stubborn radiator, that she began to feel something close to steady again. Every day she showed up. She taught scales to boys who didn't know their fathers and harmonies to girls who barely trusted their own voices. She taught discipline, tempo, resilience, and she played only when the room was empty. At dusk, when the last of the students had gone and the silence settled in like a familiar coat, her hands moved over the keys with caution at first. But music, like love, returns when you stop forcing it to. Still, Nathaniel haunted her. Not like a ghost, but like a possibility left, unfinished. She hadn't blocked his number. She hadn't deleted his messages. She just couldn't answer them. Every time she tried, words failed. What could she say? That she missed him? That his world had burned hers, even as it made her shine? Sometimes she'd find herself staring out the window during class, the piano's worn cover closed, and wonder if he was still in New York thinking about her too, or if he had moved on, tucked her away in a chapter labeled Almost. Nathaniel hadn't moved on. Back in Manhattan, he was unraveling slowly. His routines remained. Meetings were attended. Deals were closed, but everything felt hollow. Food tasted muted. Rooms he once loved now echoed. The rooftop lounge where Ruby used to perform had never been so quiet. He tried to distract himself with work, with travel, with Emily's insistence that he start dating again. But nothing fit. Every woman he met seemed to say the wrong thing, or smile with teeth too sharp. Every conversation made him feel like he was pretending to be someone else again. Someone who hadn't once watched a woman sing under fairy lights and known in his bones that he was in the presence of something sacred. He still checked her social media even though she hadn't posted in weeks. He still drove by the park where they first reconnected. And he still played the piano, alone in the dark, fumbling through pieces they once shared. It was Emily who finally found her. Or rather, found a breadcrumb. She was scrolling late one night and stumbled on a video posted by a local Chicago nonprofit. It was grainy footage, a girl leading a group of kids through a clapping rhythm game. But Emily knew that bun, that voice, that laugh. She burst into Nathaniel's office the next morning, phone in hand. I found her. He watched the video in silence. Ruby was crouched beside a boy with 2 big headphones, gently guiding his hands as he played the drum pads. Her smile was unguarded. She looked exhausted and radiant and alive. Nathaniel left for Chicago the next day. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't even alert Elena or the center's staff. He just sat in a rented car across the street and waited. Watched. He saw Ruby leave the building just before sunset, a tote bag over her shoulder, her guitar strapped to her back like a soldier's weapon. She looked thinner, but her steps still had that rhythm, half dancer, half survivor. He didn't approach. He returned the next day and the one after that. Always parked in the same spot, always leaving before she noticed. Once, she passed right, in front of his car, head down, humming to herself. He didn't breathe until she was gone. And then one Friday afternoon, he did something he hadn't planned. He sent her a gift. It wasn't flowers or jewelry or anything predictable. It was a piano, a beautiful upright kawaii, the kind that belonged in a small concert hall. It was delivered to the community center with no sender name. Just a simple note, typed and taped to the lid, for the ones who still believe in magic. When Ruby saw it, her breath caught. She knew immediately. She placed her palm gently on the keys, not pressing down, just feeling the cool weight of the ivory. Then she sat, played one soft chord, and for the first time in weeks the music didn't hurt. It healed. That evening she stayed late, played for no one and everyone. Her fingers moved not with performance but with prayer. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But when she finally stood, something had shifted. She walked home, her heart restless. In her apartment, she stared at her phone, Nathaniel's name glowing in her recent calls. She wanted to call him. But what would she say? That she missed him? That she was angry? That he'd been right about everything and still made every part of her uncertain? Instead, she typed a message. "I'm okay." She didn't send it right away. She read it 10 times. Then she hit send. Nathaniel received it at 2:14 a.m. He read it in bed, lit only by the blue light of his screen. He smiled, a small broken thing, and placed the phone on his chest like it was a lifeline. Then he slept for the first time in 3 nights. In the days that followed, Ruby kept teaching. Nathaniel kept waiting. But something in the current had changed. They were no longer 2 people torn apart. They were 2 people finding their way back, inch by cautious inch. In Chicago, the kids started calling the piano Miss Ruby's magic box. They said it made the room feel warmer. Some even claimed it helped them sleep better after lessons. Ruby didn't correct them. Magic was as good an explanation as any. But the truth she knew was simpler. It wasn't magic, it was love. Quiet, stubborn, unfinished love. And somewhere across the country, in a glass tower overlooking the city where they'd met, that same love sat at a piano bench, still waiting. For its next note, days in Chicago grew longer, the cold retreating to make room for a hesitant spring. At the community center, Ruby began arriving earlier and staying later. She filled her empty hours by organizing workshops, decorating bulletin boards, and convincing the board of directors to let her host a weekend open mic night for the neighborhood. "I want these kids to feel seen," she told Elena one morning. "Not just taught, seen." Elena, always skeptical but supportive, raised an eyebrow. "You sure this isn't just a way to stop yourself from thinking about that man?" Ruby laughed, but it was a fragile sound. "If it is, I hope the distraction is worth something to someone." The truth was, even surrounded by children and music and noise, Ruby still felt the echo of Nathaniel in the quiet. It lived in the pause between piano notes, in the breeze that moved the curtains when she stayed after hours. It lingered in the way she almost said his name every time her phone lit up with an unknown number. The open mic night was held in the center's main room, strung with mismatched lights and folding chairs that creaked under weight. Kids performed raps and recited poems, mothers read stories, and an old man named Clarence sang Motown covers that had the crowd clapping in time. At the end of the night, Elena nudged Ruby. "They're waiting for you." Ruby hadn't planned to perform. She didn't even bring her guitar. But the piano, the one Nathaniel had sent, sat just a few feet away, waiting, like it knew the moment was inevitable. She walked toward it slowly, as if approaching something sacred. The room quieted. Ruby sat, touched the keys, and took a breath. "I haven't sung in front of people in a while," she said softly. "I left a piece of myself behind. Tonight feels like I might be ready to find it again." And then she played. It wasn't flawless. It wasn't flashy. But it was honest. A song she hadn't written before. Something new born from the ache of distance, the sharpness of remembering, and the strange comfort of being missed. When she finished, the room applauded. But one little girl in the front row whispered, "You sound like you're in love." Ruby's fingers froze on the last chord. She looked down at the keys. "Maybe I still am," she murmured, not quite loud enough for anyone else to hear. That night, after the chairs had been stacked and the last child had been picked up, Ruby stayed behind. She stared at her phone again, scrolled through her unsent drafts, half-finished messages. One said, "I miss you." Another read, "Do you still think about me?" She deleted them all, Then she typed something new. Meet me in New York. If you still want to. I'll be at the place where you first saw me, not the station. The real first time. The park, the stage. Saturday at 6. If you're not there, I'll understand. Her thumb hovered, and then she hit send. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Nathaniel had retreated further into himself. His penthouse grew dusty, his staff treaded lightly. Emily visited less, worried that her brother had begun constructing a life around absence. "You're not angry," she told him once. "You're just lost." He didn't deny it. He spent that Saturday pretending to work. Sat in the office, took meetings, checked his watch every half hour. By 5:40, his hands were shaking. At 5:55, he was in a cab. At 6:01, he arrived at the east side of Central Park. The fair was long gone, the stage dismantled. But there she was, Ruby, standing beside a food truck, arms folded, heart clearly bracing. Their eyes met. He crossed the distance slowly. No suit this time, no performance. Just a man with too much to say and too many ways to get it wrong. "You came," she said, as if it was the one thing she hadn't dared to believe. "I didn't know if you'd still want me to." "I didn't know either," she replied. "Until you sent the piano, until I played it." Nathaniel stepped closer. "I didn't send it to win you back." "I know," she said. "I sent it so you'd remember what your voice sounds like when no one's telling you who to be." She nodded, eyes shimmering. "I remembered." They stood in silence, the noise of the city humming around them like an orchestra warming up. "I'm not the same girl I was in your hotel lounge," she said. "And I can't promise I'll ever be comfortable in your world." Nathaniel's voice was quiet. "Then we'll make a new world, one that belongs to both of us." She stepped into him, heart beating fast. "No stages, no lights, not tonight. Just us," he said, reaching for her hand. When their fingers intertwined, it wasn't explosive. It wasn't cinematic. It was something deeper, like exhaling. "After holding your breath for too long." She leaned her head on his chest, and for the first time in months, everything was still. Everything was home. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains of Nathaniel's penthouse, casting a golden hue over the room. Ruby stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open to meet his gaze. "Good morning," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes." She smiled softly. "Morning." They lay in comfortable silence, the events of the previous night still fresh in their minds. "I can't believe we're here," Ruby said, her voice tinged with wonder. Nathaniel nodded. "Neither can I, but I'm glad we are." They spent the day exploring the city together, visiting art galleries, strolling through Central Park, and sharing stories over coffee at a quaint cafe. As evening approached, they returned to the penthouse, where Nathaniel prepared dinner while Ruby played the piano, filling the space with music. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened. They attended charity events, collaborated on community projects, and supported each other's endeavors. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Nathaniel turned to Ruby. "I've been thinking," he began, "about us." Ruby looked at him, curiosity in her eyes. "What about us?" "I want to build a life with you," he said earnestly. "Not just moments, but a future." Tears welled up in Ruby's eyes as she nodded. "I want that too." They embraced, the city lights twinkling around them, symbolizing the bright future ahead. Together, they faced challenges, celebrated victories, and continued to grow both individually and as a couple. Their love story, once marked by chance encounters and unexpected twists, had blossomed into a partnership built on trust, respect, and unwavering support. And as they stood hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held, they knew that their journey was just beginning. Ruby stood by the tall windows of Nathaniel's penthouse, her fingers lightly resting on the glass. The view stretched far over Manhattan, the skyline bathed in the soft glow of early morning. Below, the city stirred to life, oblivious to the quiet transformation happening several stories above. Behind her, Nathaniel sat at the edge of the grand piano bench, hands hovering above the keys, waiting. It had become something of a ritual, the two of them waking early to greet the city together, coffee in hand, hearts still tender from the night's conversations. There was a softness to their mornings, a stillness neither of them had expected, to find in each other's worlds. "I still don't feel like I belong here," Ruby murmured, eyes following a yellow cab winding through the street. Nathaniel looked up. "Why not?" She turned to him. "Because this place was built for someone who always knew how to be seen. I spent most of my life trying not to be." He stood, walked over, and placed his hand on her back. Then maybe it's time to stop hiding. Ruby rested her forehead against the window, thinking. You make it sound easy. It's not, he admitted, but maybe it's worth it. That day marked the beginning of a new rhythm between them. Ruby had accepted an offer to co-host a youth arts fundraiser in Washington, D.C., a prestigious event sponsored by a National Arts Alliance. Nathaniel was set to receive an award for his philanthropic contributions to cultural development, and the board, upon hearing about Ruby's story, had asked if she would perform a closing piece. It was the kind of opportunity she never would have imagined a year ago. The event was set in a historic performance hall, its marble facade looming with quiet grandeur. The day before the event, they took a train down from New York, traveling. Without entourage or press, just two people relearning what partnership meant without expectation. On the train, Ruby leaned her head on Nathaniel's shoulder, a book open in her lap. Are you nervous? About what? Tomorrow. All those people watching. He chuckled. I've spent most of my life being watched. It's not the stage I'm nervous about. She tilted her head to look at him. Then what? He hesitated, then smiled. I'm nervous that this is the part where everything gets too perfect and the universe decides it's time to shake the table. Ruby laughed softly, threading her fingers through his. Then we hold on tighter when it does. Washington buzzed with energy. As they checked into their hotel, Nathaniel was whisked away to meet with board members and press representatives. Ruby used the time to rehearse on the venue's grand piano. The performance hall was vast and intimidating, but the moment her hands touched the keys, the world narrowed to something quiet and sacred. That night, Emily arrived. She'd flown down to support them both and brought with her the kind of energy that filled rooms. Please tell me you two are actually getting some rest, she said, hugging Ruby tight. Because this event? Massive. We're holding it together, Ruby smiled. Emily turned to her brother. And you? You look calm. Do I? That's how I know you're terrified, Emily teased. This is the most important woman in your life, and you're sharing the biggest spotlight of your career with her. Of course you're terrified. Ruby looked at him. Are you? He met her eyes. Only that you'll walk away from all of it. She took his hand, squeezing it. Not without you. The day of the event unfolded in a blur of preparations. Ruby wore a simple floor-length black gown, her hair pinned in soft waves. Nathaniel's tuxedo was sharp, classic, understated. The room filled with senators, artists, executives, and educators. Yet when Ruby stepped onto the stage, none of that mattered. She sat at the piano and told the story of how music had saved her, how a chance mistake turned into something extraordinary. Her final song was not about fame or fortune. It was about courage, about the small daily acts of choosing to believe in yourself again, even when the world gives you every reason not to. When she finished, the audience was silent for a breathless second, then erupted into applause. Nathaniel watched from the wings, his heart full and aching. He didn't see her as the girl from Queens or the singer in his hotel lounge. He saw the woman who had taught him how to feel again, how to listen, how to risk. That night, as they returned to their hotel suite, Ruby took off her shoes and sat. By the window, still in her dress, her bare feet tucked beneath her. That didn't feel like me, she said softly. That felt like someone else entirely. Nathaniel sat beside her. It was still you, just a version you hadn't met yet. She leaned into him. What happens now? He thought about that. Now we build, not in marble and glass, in small ways, in the way we show up, in what we create. Ruby kissed his shoulder, then his jaw. I like building with you. The following morning, they walked hand in hand through the National Mall before returning to New York. And in the days that followed, Ruby launched her own nonprofit with Emily and Elena's help, dedicated to bringing instruments and music, programs to underserved schools. She named it the Yellow Sweater Foundation. When asked why, she told reporters, because sometimes the most beautiful things begin with the biggest mistakes. And Nathaniel, watching her speak with conviction to the press and the kids who idolized her, knew he'd never seen anyone more extraordinary. Not in any boardroom, not in any ballroom, only here, in the quiet, in the truth, in the music they'd created together. The wedding day arrived beneath a sky so blue it felt as if the city itself had been painted in celebration. In a restored rooftop garden at the Aurelia Hotel, where Ruby had once nervously stepped onto a stage with nothing but Her guitar and a borrowed dream, flowers bloomed in full defiance of Manhattan's steel and glass reputation. Everything, from the string quartet warming up in the corner to the carefully mismatched chairs Ruby insisted on renting from a local vintage shop, felt intentional, intimate, alive. Ruby stood in the bridal suite of the hotel, adjusting the delicate lace of her ivory gown in front of the mirror. Her reflection showed a woman she barely recognized, not because the dress transformed her, but because she had grown into this moment. Thread by thread, note by note, she touched the gold bracelet on her wrist, a wedding gift from Nathaniel's grandmother. A sapphire gleamed in the center, the same blue as the first dress she wore the night he took her to that quiet bistro and called her extraordinary. Elena, now her wedding coordinator and best woman of honor, stepped inside carrying a champagne flute and a box of bobby pins. "You look like a legend," she said, tears threatening her lashes. Ruby smiled. "I feel like I'm standing in someone else's story." "No," Elena replied. "This is yours and you wrote every page." Outside, guests began to take their seats. Emily fluttered between rows, greeting guests, checking last-minute details, and scolding the best man Mark for sneaking champagne too early. At the far end of the aisle, Nathaniel stood in a deep grey suit, hands folded in front of him, a calm expression betraying the storm of emotion behind his eyes. Richard Carter arrived last, carrying a velvet box and a cautious pride in his step. He had not always supported the life his son had chosen, but time had softened the edges of his disapproval. Ruby had not won him over with wealth or polish. She'd earned his respect through grit, grace, and the quiet way she transformed spaces simply by being in them. The music began, and the crowd stood. Ruby stepped into view, her hand wrapped around her grandfather Luis's arm. The old man's back was straighter than it had been in years. His eyes welled with tears he refused to wipe away. As they walked down the aisle, the air held still, as if even the city dared not interrupt. Nathaniel's breath caught when he saw her, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was everything he had ever hoped to find in a world that had once felt hollow. The ceremony was simple. Vows were exchanged with trembling voices and stolen glances. When Ruby promised to keep singing even when the silence feels safer, Nathaniel's hands shook as he slipped the ring on her finger. "I promise to hold you, even when we disagree." "Especially then," he said, voice cracking. A gentle cheer rose when they kissed. Gentle not because it lacked joy, but because even the guests knew they were witnessing something sacred. The reception unfolded like a symphony of stories. Ruby performed one song, not from the stage, but seated beside Nathaniel on the piano bench, her voice threading through the conversation like a hymn. It was a song she had written in secret, a love letter not only to him but to the journey they had taken to reach this moment. The lyrics spoke of missed trains, wrong hugs, courage blooming in the cracks, and the unexpected miracles that rise from ordinary places. Later, speeches were made. Emily raised her glass and declared, "My brother finally stopped building towers and started building a life." Eleanor toasted the yellow sweater that started it all, and Richard Carter stood holding the small velvet box he had carried in. "My wife once told me," he said, "that love is not who you find, but what you build after. Today, I see that truth in the two of you." He opened the box to reveal a small key. "This belonged to my mother. It opens the music room at our family's summer estate in Maine. It hasn't been used in years. I hope it finds new music now." Ruby took the key, her hands shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. As the night wore on, the rooftop twinkled with fairy lights and laughter. Ruby's students from the Yellow Sweater Foundation performed a surprise dance number that melted every heart in the room. The food was simple but exquisite. The favors were handmade bookmarks quoting Ruby's favorite lyric, "Let the music lead you home." Sometime past midnight, after most of the guests had gone and the music had softened, Nathaniel and Ruby stood together. At the edge of the rooftop garden, barefoot, champagne glasses in hand. "Do you remember the first time I saw you?" he asked. "At the train station," she teased. "No," he smiled. "Before that, Central Park. You were singing. You didn't see me." Ruby leaned her head against his shoulder. "Maybe I did. Maybe that's why I kept coming back." The city shimmered around them, endless and close all at once. "Are you happy?" he asked. She nodded. "Not the loud kind. The deep, quiet kind." He looked at her, the woman who had changed everything. "What comes next?" Ruby smiled. "Whatever." we write. And somewhere between the heartbeat of the city and the hush of the stars, they stepped into the next chapter. Not perfect, not easy, but entirely their own. A love built not from fairy tales, but from truth, from music, from second chances and unexpected beginnings. And it all started with the wrong hug from the right man. Or maybe the right hug from the woman who never needed saving, just someone who finally saw her clearly. 3 weeks after the wedding, Ruby stood in the center of the Yellow Sweater Foundation's main classroom, overseeing the installation of a new sound system donated by a major arts patron. Laughter from children filtered through the halls, and the walls were lined with colorful hand-drawn portraits labeled My Dream Stage. Everything felt like it was finally, truly falling into place. Then her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, too caught up in the day's joy. But something in her chest whispered otherwise. Unknown number. She hesitated. Answered. Is this Ruby Moreno? Yes. This is Dr. Elaine Ferris from the Midtown Neurological Institute. Your grandfather, Luis Moreno, was brought in this morning. He had a fall. He's stable, but we need you to come in as soon as possible. Ruby's blood ran cold. In a blur, she arranged for staff to cover her classes and caught the first cab to the hospital. The ride was silent, the city suddenly foreign again. Cold, uncaring, loud in all the wrong ways. When she arrived, Luis was conscious but groggy. A deep gash marked his forehead and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. Papa, she whispered, kneeling at his bedside. He opened his eyes. Mija. I slipped. Don't cry. I'm not, she lied, brushing back tears. The doctor pulled her aside an hour later. The fall isn't the primary concern, she said gently. The CT scan revealed an aneurysm. It may have been growing for years. We'll need to operate immediately. Ruby staggered under the weight of the news. Is there a chance? There's always a chance. But I'd recommend notifying your family, just in case. She called Nathaniel, her hands shaking. He answered on the first ring. Ruby, I need you. I'm on my way. That night, as Ruby sat in the sterile hospital waiting room, still in her foundation t-shirt and jeans, she felt the first thread of that old fear return. That happiness wasn't meant to last, that the universe always demanded something in exchange. Hours passed. Nathaniel arrived and wrapped his arms around her, grounding her. Whatever happens, I'm here. Always. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 excruciating hours. When the doctor finally emerged, Ruby stood before she could even speak. He made it through. He's in recovery. It'll be a long road, but he's strong. Relief knocked the breath out of her. In the days that followed, Ruby barely left the hospital. She brought her guitar and played softly in his room. Nathaniel came by each morning with coffee and left only after he was sure she'd eaten. One morning, as Louis slept, Ruby turned to him and said, I used to believe that love was something that could be lost overnight, that it had a timer. And now? She looked at him, eyes steady. Now I believe it's what carries us when everything else falls apart. 2 weeks later, Luis was moved to rehab. Ruby returned to the foundation, greeted by cheers and hand-drawn welcome signs from the kids. She smiled, but something had shifted in her. A new layer of resolve, a sharper sense of what mattered. Life would always change. That was the only guarantee. But love, real love, wasn't a fairy tale. It was the quiet hand that held you steady through the storm. If you followed Ruby and Nathaniel's story until now, thank you. Their journey has only just begun. What happens when love is tested? When dreams grow beyond what we thought we could hold. We'd love to bring you more. Subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, and join us for the next chapter of stories that stir your heart and remind you. Sometimes, the best beginnings come from life's most unexpected twists.